What would you do if you were a tiny cub, lost in the vast forest, surrounded by a pack of hungry wolves? The fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being trapped with no way out. Well, that's exactly what happened to a young brown bear cub. And what came next will shock you. The sun was sinking lower behind the trees, casting long, dark shadows across the forest floor. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. But for one small bear cub, none of this seemed peaceful. In fact, the forest felt terrifying. Alone, it was nothing but a small bundle of fur, wandering aimlessly through the underbrush, eyes wide with fear. The cub's heart beat fast in its chest as it struggled to keep up with its mother, who had been chasing a deer in the distance. Somewhere along the way, the cub had gotten separated. Now, it was completely alone. Its tiny paws moved cautiously over the forest floor, brushing through the leaves while its nose twitched at the unfamiliar smells around it. The forest, so full of life, now felt like an endless maze. It was getting dark, and the cub could feel the chill in the air. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through its little body. It didn't know where it was, or how to find its way back. All it knew was that it was vulnerable, alone. The cub's stomach growled, but it didn't dare stop to eat. Its mind was consumed by a deep, gnawing fear. It had heard the stories, the tales of wolves that roamed the forest in packs, hunting anything that crossed their path. Wolves were the stuff of nightmares, the apex predators of the woods. And now, as the cub's eyes scanned the trees around it, it realized something terrifying. It wasn't alone. From the shadows, they emerged. 3 wolves, their eyes glinting with hunger. The cub froze, every instinct telling it to run, but its legs wouldn't move. The wolves moved in a perfect circle around it, closing the gap slowly, relentlessly. They had been watching it for a while. It was only a matter of time before they attacked. The cub's breath caught in its throat. Its tiny body trembled with fear. There was nowhere to run, no way to escape. The wolves were fast and clever, and the cub was no match for them. Its only chance was to hide, but there was nowhere to hide. The wolves stalked closer, their growls low and menacing. The cub's tiny heart hammered in its chest. It was surrounded, trapped, and just as the wolves moved in for the kill, something remarkable happened. Something no one could have expected. The wind shifted, and from deep within the forest, a new sound echoed. Heavy, powerful footsteps. Something big was coming. The wolves hesitated, their ears perked up, and for the briefest moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Could this mysterious presence be a savior, or just another predator looking for an easy meal? The tension in the air was thick as the wolves paused, their sharp eyes flicking toward the sound of approaching footsteps. The cub's heart raced faster, pounding against its chest like a drum, each beat filled with dread. The wolves, usually so confident in their pursuit, now hesitated. Someone was coming. Then, through the trees, emerged a massive shadow, its body rippling with strength. The cub's eyes widened, filled with both fear and hope. What was it? Was it another wolf? Or perhaps something even more terrifying? But then, as the creature stepped into the clearing, the cub saw it clearly. It was a mountain lion. The lion was enormous, its coat a golden brown that blended perfectly with the forest's dusky shades. Its powerful limbs rippled as it moved silently through the trees. Its eyes, cold, focused, and sharp, locked onto the wolves, then slowly shifted to the cub. The air around them seemed to still, as if the entire forest was watching. For a few moments, neither the wolves nor the mountain lion made a sound. The wolves, unsure of what to do, growled lowly in warning. Their eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. A lone lion wasn't something they had expected to encounter. Still, there were 3 of them, and only one of it. They outnumbered the lion, but even they knew that lions weren't to be underestimated. The mountain lion stood tall, its muscles coiled and ready to strike. It didn't seem afraid. If anything, it seemed unbothered. The lion's gaze never wavered as it took a step forward, its body language both calm and menacing. It wasn't interested in a standoff. It was interested in one thing: protecting the helpless cub behind it. The wolves, frustrated by the unexpected turn of events, took a step closer, their teeth bared. Their fur bristled with tension as they prepared to pounce. The lion didn't flinch. And then, in a blur of motion, the lion lunged. It moved faster than the cub could even process. With a swift swipe of its claws, the lion struck the nearest wolf, sending it tumbling through the air. The wolf yelped in surprise, its body crashing against the forest floor. It scrambled to get up, growling in pain and confusion. The other 2 wolves growled louder, realizing that this lion was no easy target. They advanced, but the lion was already in motion again. With a flick of its tail and another explosive lunge, it slashed at a second wolf, its claws finding purchase in the creature's side. The wolf yelped and staggered back, its eyes wide with shock. The cub could hardly believe what it was seeing. This powerful lion, who had no reason to help it, was fighting off the wolves, one by one, with unmatched precision and speed. The growls of the wolves and the lion's fierce roars echoed through the trees, but the cub couldn't tear its eyes away. For the first time in what felt like forever, the cub felt a glimmer of hope. Could this lion really save it? Was this unexpected hero going to be its protector? As the last wolf backed away, defeated and hesitant to take on the lion any longer, the forest grew quiet. The lion stood tall, its chest heaving with each breath, its eyes locked on the retreating pack. The wolves, now retreating into the shadows, had been outmatched. The lion's display of strength and dominance had made them realize this was not a fight they were going to win. They left, disappearing into the darkening woods, leaving the cub and the lion alone in the quiet aftermath. The cub, heart still racing, watched the lion warily. It had been saved, but by something it never would have expected, a creature it had never thought would stand in its corner. The lion turned slowly, its gaze softening, and it took a step toward the cub. And for the first time, the cub realized that it wasn't alone anymore. The forest was eerily quiet after the wolves retreated into the shadows. The air, once filled with the growls of predators and the rustle of leaves, now hung still as if the world itself was catching its breath. The cub, its small chest heaving with fear and confusion, remained rooted to the spot. Its eyes never left the lion, this incredible creature that had come out of nowhere to save it from certain death. The mountain lion stood nearby, its powerful body relaxed but alert. It didn't move closer to the cub, but its presence was undeniably comforting. The cub's heart still beat quickly, but no longer from fear of the lion. Instead, it was the overwhelming emotion of gratitude, of amazement. The cub had been certain it would meet its end that day, but now it was alive, protected by a creature so much larger, faster, and stronger. It was beyond comprehension. The lion's gaze never left the cub as it cautiously approached, its soft eyes studying the small bear with an intensity that was almost gentle. For a moment, neither moved. The cub, still trembling, watched the lion as though unsure whether this was real. Was it really safe now? Was the danger gone? The lion, sensing the cub's hesitation, moved closer but slowly, its steps graceful and deliberate. Its large, muscular frame moved with such fluidity that it almost appeared as though it was gliding. As it reached the cub's side, the lion crouched down to the ground, lowering itself to the cub's level. Its golden eyes softened, and the cub, still unsure, could feel the lion's calming energy. It was a moment that felt almost magical. The cub, unsure of what to do, slowly inched forward, drawn to the lion's presence. It was a strange thing. This bond, this connection between the two of them, one a fierce predator, the other a young, vulnerable cub. Yet in that moment, they shared something that transcended species, something deep and instinctual. The lion had not only saved the cub's life, but had in some way become its protector. But the danger wasn't truly over. While the wolves had retreated for now, the cub knew the forest was full of dangers. The lion might have scared off the pack, but wolves didn't give up easily. The cub could feel the weight of the night pressing down, a reminder that the wild was always on the hunt, and in the wild, even the most unlikely allies had to stay alert. The lion's role as a protector was only just beginning. The cub took a deep breath, the fresh, cold air filling its lungs. It had to move forward, had to find a way to survive. But it couldn't do it alone. Not anymore. It had already seen what could happen in the face of danger. The lion had shown it that strength could be shared, that there were protectors in the world, even when it seemed there was no hope left. The lion gave a low, rumbling growl, its voice a deep vibration in the air. It wasn't a threat, but a signal, a warning. The lion stood, keeping its body between the cub and the darkening forest. The cub looked up at the lion with a newfound sense of trust. For the first time in hours, it didn't feel completely alone. It felt protected. It felt safe. And with that, the two of them began to move, side by side, into the unknown. The forest was vast, full of danger, but it was no longer the terrifying place it had been when the cub was by itself. The lion had given it a chance, given them both a chance to survive the night and beyond. The night fell deeper, and the forest was cloaked in shadows, but somehow it didn't feel as scary as it had before. The cub, though still small and vulnerable, was walking beside the mountain lion now, feeling a strange sense of calm that had been missing just hours ago. The rustling of leaves, the distant hoots of owls, and the calls of other creatures filled the air. But it was different now. There was an unspoken understanding between the cub and the lion, an understanding that as long as they stayed together, they could face whatever came next. As they moved through the forest, the lion kept a careful watch, its golden eyes scanning the darkness with an intensity that never wavered. The cub, still new to the ways of the wild, watched the lion closely, learning how it moved through the underbrush with barely a sound, its paw pads pressing softly into the earth. The lion seemed to glide, its every movement purposeful and precise. It was the perfect predator, a creature in tune with the world around it, aware of every shift in the wind, every whisper of sound. The cub tried to mimic the lion's movements, but it was clumsy, its legs still unsteady, its body small and awkward. It stumbled over a fallen log and tumbled to the ground, but before it could even think of getting up, the lion was there, standing protectively over it. With a low growl, the lion nudged the cub gently with its nose, almost as if to say, "You're not alone anymore." The cub looked up, meeting the lion's steady gaze, and for a brief moment felt a flicker of confidence. The forest was vast and full of dangers, but the lion wasn't just leading the cub through it, it was teaching the cub. With every step, the lion showed the cub how to use its senses, how to listen to the quiet sounds of the woods, how to smell the difference between a rabbit and a deer. The cub began to understand the forest in ways it never had before. It learned to read the signs of danger, to move more silently, to listen for the faintest sounds, and with each lesson, it grew stronger, more confident. But the cub's journey wasn't just about survival, it was also about trust. The cub had to trust the lion, trust that it was leading it in the right direction, trust that it wouldn't leave it behind. The lion, too, had to trust the cub, despite the difference in size and strength. It had saved the cub once, but now, as the cub stumbled and struggled to keep up, it had to show patience, had to keep the cub close, had to protect it without hesitation. As they traveled deeper into the forest, the moonlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft, silvery glow on the ground. The cub felt its body growing tired, but it wasn't afraid. The lion was there, always just a few steps ahead, always watching, always guiding. It was a strange and comforting feeling, the presence of a protector, the quiet assurance that no matter how dangerous the world might be, the cub wouldn't have to face it alone. And so, as the night stretched on, the cub and the lion traveled together, side by side, through the vast wilderness. It wasn't clear where their journey would lead, but the cub now had something it had never had before: hope. It had a companion, a guide, and for the first time, the wild didn't seem so terrifying. The lion had changed everything. The dawn was breaking, the first light of morning filtering through the dense trees, casting golden rays that danced on the forest floor. The air felt different now, cooler and fresher, filled with the scent of pine and wet earth. The cub had walked beside the mountain lion through the night, following its steady pace, learning from every move. They had faced the darkness together, and now, as the new day began, the cub was no longer the helpless creature it had been when the sun had set the night before. It was still small, still inexperienced, but it had learned so much. It had learned to listen, to watch, to trust. The lion had shown it how to navigate the forest, how to read the signs that nature left behind. But perhaps the most important lesson the cub had learned was about strength. Not just the strength of the body, but the strength of the heart. The lion had given it something more than survival. It had given it a chance to grow, a chance to stand tall. With each step, the cub became more confident, more sure of its place in the world. It had stopped stumbling so much, its legs no longer weak and wobbly. It had started to understand the rhythm of the wild, to recognize the patterns of the forest. It was no longer just a frightened cub. Now, it was a survivor. As they reached the edge of a small clearing, the lion stopped and turned to face the cub. For the first time, it seemed to acknowledge the cub's growth, the journey they had taken together. The lion's eyes, deep and wise, met the cub's gaze, and there was something in that look, a silent understanding. The cub had made it. It was no longer the scared little bear lost in the woods. It had become something more. It had found its place in the wild. The lion let out a low, contented growl, the sound a soft rumble in the morning stillness. It was a sound of approval, of completion. The cub looked up at the lion one last time, gratitude swelling in its chest. They had survived together. They had fought together. And now, they had reached the dawn, both standing strong, both ready for whatever came next. The cub, now understanding the lion's role in its life, knew it wasn't just about protection anymore. It wasn't about being rescued from danger. It was about partnership, about a bond formed through the struggle, through the shared experience of survival. The wild was a harsh place, but with the right companion, it became a place of possibilities. As the lion turned and began to move away, the cub followed without hesitation. There was no more fear in its steps, no more doubt. Together, they would face whatever the forest had in store. They had found strength in one another, and that strength would carry them forward. And in that moment, as the first rays of the sun bathed the forest in light, the cub knew that it had been given a new chance, a chance to live, to thrive, to grow. And with its protector by its side, it was no longer just surviving, it was living.